right, welcome everybody to the final session of Brand U. I'm Dr. Craig Ingstrom. I'm the undergraduate director for the Department of Communication Studies here at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. Today's event has been sponsored all day by the generous donations of our alumni and friends, as well as the College of Liberal Arts here at SIU and Communication at Work. In this session, we're going to have a very excellent kind of Q&A back and forth with Lena Williams, and she is a global HRM, and she's going to be talking a little bit about her work in intercultural communication because she works globally and actually has just told me that, hey, look, I've been up since 1 a.m. She's going to probably mention that herself because she works in European time. But with that said, Saluki Monica Fudala will introduce Lena.
Thanks, Craig. Hello, I am Monica Fudala, a senior in communication studies here at SIU. I would like to introduce Lena Williams. Lena is certified by the Society of the Human Resource Management, or the Society for Human Resource Management as a senior certified professional, or an SHRM SCP. And she's an accomplished global HR professional with a proven ability to develop trusting relationships while providing support to employees at all levels within an organization. She has demonstrated experience in driving business outcomes through strategic human resource planning, employee engagement, talent acquisition, employee and leadership coaching for Sandvik Coromant, a Swedish-located global manufacturing and machining company where she is the global HR business partner and global sales operations / enterprise program / sales project leader. She is an expert in HR program design, change management, and global HR consultation. Her core strengths include communication, organizational design, metrics, project management, and process design skills. She has a passion for organizational effectiveness and development and is a key leader and collaborator during full Workday lifecycle implementation. With that being said, I'd like to welcome Lena Williams to SIU Carbondale.
Thank you so much, Monica. And thank you guys for inviting me and having me be a part of this symposium. I feel truly, truly honored.
Yeah, we're very happy to have us here. I think a great starting point would be for you to tell us a little bit about what you're, doing sort of on a daily basis, what your role entails, and where you're doing it.
Yep. So as I mentioned earlier, or as you mentioned earlier, Craig, I am a global HR business partner working for a global organization based out of Sandviken, Sweden. Sandviken is approximately 2.5 hours south of Stockholm. I've been with this organization, Sandvik Coromant, for a little over 5 years. Right now, I am supporting our global operations team. I also partner with our global sales organization. And right now, I do a lot of consultation with our sales organization across all footprint. We have 6 sales areas, and I do a lot of consultation work. I have some critical projects that are HR related, shaping the organization, and anything that will help with talent and development and change management. I think change management is something that's really critical in our day and time. And the organization, even personally, things always change. And being able to embrace those changes and foster those changes is something that I find very rewarding and definitely something that's really important in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So could you talk just a little bit about your history? How did you get to where you are today? Because, obviously you don't walk out of, college or however you started your career and then end up suddenly, leading a company globally.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I would say was the initial start for me, I started out actually with recruitment. For me, recruitment was a really big part of understanding the organization. I mean, if you go into a recruiter's position, you learn the business, you learn the people, you learn what the organization needs from a talent perspective. I mean, recruitment touches every area from compensation to career development, career pathing, projects. So the recruitment was really a big star for me. And then from there, I actually got into unemployment because that gave me both sides of the spectrum, from the employee perspective of what makes the employee tick to the employer perspective of how we really want our employees to be engaged. So that engagement piece from the unemployment perspective gave me a different sense. And it actually took me down the path of going into a pre-law degree. So Craig was, Mr. Engstrom, Dr. Engstrom was previously one of my professors. And I actually went and got a pre-law degree to understand exactly what was my passion, because you want to be able to specialize in some area, but then you needed to really branch out and figure out, what will give you the most pleasure and the most energy when you get up. And I knew that I wanted to have some way of influencing others. As I went down that path of my pre-law degree, communication was, to me, I learned was the core foundation of everything I needed to touch. And that's how I ended up going into communication and leadership. And I ended up at Elmhurst University here in the Chicagoland area, where Dr. Engstrom was one of my professors. And the more I got into communication, I really began to realize that it has to be the core foundation of any role you go into, whether it is human resources, whether it's finance, whether it is manufacturing. You have to be able to communicate at all levels, up the organization, down the organization, and laterally across. That communication is the core of it. And I think that is how I ended up really understanding that this is where my passion is. People, in order to deal with people, you have to have a passion, you have to be able to communicate. And there's so many different ways of communicating with individuals, whether it's via the text messages, social media, verbal conversation, nonverbal conversation, communication in all manners is what's most important.
Great, thank you for that answer. So because you brought up sort of coursework and so forth, what courses have you taken that have been, most valuable to you, specifically in your role? And that could be communication or the pre-law courses. What have you found valuable?
I found the cultural communication to be the most valuable, especially for the role that I'm in. Having, being based and being a U.S. citizen, and then being able to work and communicate with individuals across the borders. I mean, right now, because of the pandemic, I am here in the U.S. Typically, I am traveling globally, primarily in Europe. And in each one of the cultures, the communication style has to be adaptable. And being a part of cultural communication courses that I've taken has actually set me up for success. I mean, I found that originally when I started down this journey, there was a challenge, that I think if I were to say what my big challenge was, it's not so much of saying hello, it's about getting people on board and being able to speak their language to get their buy-in to say, yes, this is something that I really want to be a part of the journey, whatever that journey is, whether it's a project, whether it's the collaboration and across the organization to get something approved. You have to be able to speak and listen and hear. And communication is that you have to be able to hear and be able to speak in the language that will be able to get people on board. And that's part of the change management process as well. So I think that cultural communication was probably the most influential on my career path and the decisions that I've taken.
Yeah, that's great to hear. We offer multiple intercultural communication courses, including an intercultural training class here at SIU. So, I'm happy that you said that. I would have thought that HR would have been leaning towards law as well, though. You would have to know a lot about rules and procedures, or is that something you just kind of learn on the job?
Well, no, actually, you do take, I think I'm getting some interference with sound. I'm going to add my earpiece and see if that makes it a little better. Bear with me here. See if it changes. I can't.
Sure, no problem. While you do that, I'll just throw out to those of you that are joining us today for the session, feel free to write a question at any time. I do go back through the chat. So if she says something, if Lena says something that you want to, like, oh, I want to ask a question about that, we will return to it at a later point. So just feel free at any time. Also, at some point, you can ask questions. You're able to raise your hand, and I can unmute your microphone for you. Okay, so let's see how that works for you, Lena. You want to give it a test?
Yes. How is that?
Much
Is that
better,
clear?
yeah.
Okay,
That's good.
great.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So
Um,
your question was about the law part in HR. So I did attend after I left Amherst University. I went on to DePaul, and I did get a certification and certificate for human resource management. And there is where a lot of the legal laws from employment standpoint, I was able to gain some additional information. Now, I did get a lot of information through self-studies because I'm a law junkie. I I actually read a lot of this stuff on my own, but I wanted to get formal training, and I did attend DePaul University subsequently after leaving Amherst University to get the formal training. And this is a continuous process. Laws are not just stagnant. It doesn't happen today and it just stays that way. So continuous education, thus the reason I'm a member of SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management. I continuously, what I call myself, keep buffed up. It changes from one moment to the next. And this pandemic, COVID, is a prime example that, today the laws were one way. Tomorrow, there's additional protections that are put in place for employees to protect just because of this pandemic situation. And what I find is some of the laws may be similar here in the US and some of the neighboring countries, but then some of them are very different. And I have to learn those laws as well. So partnering with individuals, you may not be able to read everything. Getting a network of individuals that are in the same field that you can learn from is critical to the communication process and learning opportunities as well. So I have a lot of network partners across the globe that I partner with. If I'm not sure, I reach out and ask for some guidance there too. So using your network and resources are going to be critical as well as you move along that process.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So what would you say are some of the challenges that you've experienced moving up from early career to today, and how did you overcome them?
I would say assuming, never make assumptions, assuming that one situation can be cookie cutter as you move along your path. I actually came from the financial industry. I've worked for several financial institutions, and the ways of working in one organization will not always be the same, and you cannot approach everything the same as you move along the journey. And that was a really tough lesson that I've learned. And that's why I've gotten into the change management, understanding that you have to be adaptable. You have to be open to change and understanding that there's always room for improvement and nothing is perfect. That's where you get your efficiencies from. You learn from history, you try to move forward and improve on it. So I think that for me was the toughest. And the way that I overcame that was through mentorship through one of my managers. One of my managers, the key thing she shared with me was understand that there's always, every situation, there's always a lesson to be learned, no matter whether it's a good situation or a bad situation. Embrace the failures, you learn from them. Don't shy away from it, own it, and then learn from it and move forward. Those lessons learned are going to always be what's going to be able to move you to the next level because you'll never make that mistake again.
Yeah, that's good advice. Learn as you go.
Learn as you
So
go.
I think a lot of questions that have come up today across the session. So I thought maybe you could answer this is like, what's going on with COVID? How's your organization had to change? How's it affected you? And, just generally, I think there's a lot of anxiety among students about
Yeah.
shifting into, a career in this kind of climate.
Yeah. I would say one of the beautiful things with the organization that I work for, and I have to applaud the leadership, is number one, safety first. And we open each one of our meetings with that slide. We have a safety slide, safety first. Nothing is more important than the safety of our employees and our families. And COVID has really, really um, highlighted this in such a way. And personally, I mean, I've had 3 family members be affected with this unfortunate virus. I mean, and you are forced to really take into consideration what is most important. And in the midst of this, I would have to say our organization has embraced technology. This format, this platform has become our now norm. So we in our organization, we have ensured that each one of our employees know that their safety is first. We've given them the tools that they need to still be able to connect. And what we found is that we've gained a greater level of efficiency. Where I was always traveling and I was spending half my time in the airport, now I can get a lot more work done, and I'm saving on my knees and not running like OJ through the airport. Um, but the compassion, the organization has come out with the compassion. Not that it was not ever there, but you see a heightened awareness of saying, let's make sure our employees are safe. It's not always about moving, the dollars. It is about the most important, our employees. And from a family perspective too, we take care of our employees and the families. Yes.
That's great to hear. So it's probably an organization that many folks that are here with us today are wanting to work for.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I would hope
you're doing a great
so.
job
Yes.
pitching it. Yeah. Well, I just want to take a moment. We are in the presence of greatness again. So we have two great people here today. John Burke is joining us. He had some internet problems, and I'm just grateful that this is the only time we've had major internet issues all day long. So I'm very grateful for that. And John, I'm glad to have you here. Just really quickly, John Burke is an alum of our program, and I'll let him kind of introduce himself, take over, and I'll see if I was on the right path for what they had kind of planned in a Q&A. So John, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Can.
Okay, great. Apologies, just as I was ready to join, the internet died on 2 computers, so even my backup didn't work. So I'm super happy to join you all today. Thanks, Craig, for pitching in and for all the students helping out today. Yes, appreciate everything you're doing. I'm also an HR manager at Intel, a global company. And so that's why Lena and I are certainly share a lot in common in background and experience. So super happy to be part of this panel. And yeah, all the questions were absolutely spot on. And you picked up right where we were going to go, right, Lena?
Yes,
so,
we did. Yes.
Yeah, really appreciate that. No, just otherwise, just from a global perspective, what are some of the specific HR challenges that you're seeing or experiencing? And what does it mean, interculturally when you have to deal with employee issues and or develop organizations globally where they don't always think maybe like we do in the U.S. And how do you adjust and adapt to those communication circumstances?
So, as I mentioned earlier, we definitely consider what the local requirements are. Each country have different local regulations that we must consider up front. And ethically, I saw a question come over, how do we deal with ethical situations? For me, it is about the value-based behaviors. And our company has core values, code of conducts that is globally, and we do hold our employees to those code of conducts. We train the employees on it. There is a requirement that there is a refresh every year. There are open and safe avenues where we make sure our employees, if there is something that needs to be reported, they know that they're safe in being able to report that. We do a fair and impartial look into it, and we address them appropriately. Each country may have their own governmental regulations, but within the organization, we do abide by a code of conduct. We have value-based behaviors. We ensure that our employees understand that. We do give the opportunity for recovery if there's corrections that need to be made. We do give the coaching and the opportunity to get back on the right path. And if for some reason things do not work out, still respectfully, if there is something that needs to go to the next step, we make sure that that's done in the most respectful way.
Absolutely. What's been one project you've been able to work on and feel like you've really made an impact on globally in your role, either through employee development or leader development or organizational development? Is there a particular project you can think of that would be a good little case study for folks to hear?
I would say changing the ways of working historically. Most organizations have a historical way, especially if it's a very mature organization, a historical way of doing things. There's, this is how we've always done it, and let's not change it. It's not broken. And as the world evolved, technology evolves, there's more efficiencies that can be gained. And what was put in place 10, 15, 20 years ago worked perfectly, and it matched and it met that error. But now there's efficiencies that are there, and not to take away from it, but how can we improve this to improve the quality of life? If we can take 50 minutes out of a process, an hour out of a process, we can use that hour to upskill our employees for the future, for technology. So we look at those efficiency gains that can be gotten, take that time. Those individuals who did this 10 years ago, they have a wealth of knowledge that we don't want to get rid of, but we have this futuristic thing that's going on, and their skill sets are transferable. How do we upskill those individuals? And one key project, we recently implemented Workday. And that's our human capital resource, human capital management system that we actually manage for employee records. We have Workday Learning, and we moved out of a different system, and that system functioned perfectly, but it was not meeting up for the times that we saw that we would need for our future development. We've implemented the system. We have been able to upskill a vast number of employees. And it may have felt that people may have felt that we were going to leave them behind, but we wanted to bring them along on this journey with us. And once they were able to see, oh, I have more time for me to learn more, it became a well adopted system. Now, is it perfect? No, nothing's perfect. There's always room for improvement, but we're going to do this together. And I think that is probably being a champion of that system and being a part of that project gave me so much joy. And I still feel like there's more to come.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. You and I chatted about, we went through a Workday implementation, and it was one of the single biggest system changes we had done at Intel.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, very, very cool, very big project.
Yes.
We'll talk about what it's like to work in manufacturing, as we share that as well, working for a big manufacturing company. What's that like to work in that industry, if you will? And that may be tied to, maybe a scary move you had to make in your career and jump when you didn't know what you were jumping into.
Yeah, I when I first came onto the symposium, I mentioned I came from the financial industry. I would say 90% of my career has been in been in financial industry, and I wanted to do something different. And I had never done manufacturing before, and it wasn't something I sought out. I was actually looking to do something different, and this opportunity presented itself. And I go, I don't know if I could do this, but I'm going to try it. And then I went to it, and then I realized it was going to move into something globally, because I've always worked in the US, always US based. And then the last 4 years, I have found most of my time has been spent in Europe. And it's something that was scary because it was a new industry that I had not been exposed to before. But once I got there, I said, oh, this is really different, because when you think of manufacturing, you don't always think of this sexy role of sorts. And actually, manufacturing is, to me, way cooler than financial. You have so many different facets that you can learn. I mean, you have the beginning of where it's being made all the way to delivery. You have a full range of what you can learn there. And it's very rewarding. But I think when I realized that it was global and how it influences the entire world, it's not just local to US, the influential effect that the organization have globally, I think that was probably the one thing that has really, really sparked my interest and created a passion that I didn't even know was possible.
Yep, absolutely. And yeah, thoroughly enjoy working for a global company and working with all the cultures. And so coming kind of from that perspective, or intercultural, what was the culture shock a bit, organizational culture coming into manufacturing, and then learning how to work globally? Was there any shocks there that you experienced?
I would say the biggest shock for me, and we talked about it early on before you joined, was how to communicate within the organization from a manufacturing standpoint, because each one of the what I call co-cultures had different ways of communicating with each other, which was totally different than what I was accustomed to. So learning that inner dynamics of, working internally, but then also once you move from internally, locally, US based, going externally and going globally, the culture of, US, we typically want instant gratification. We make a decision, this is what it is, do it. And then no questions asked. But going into different cultures and going into the European based and going into Asia, there's a sense of collaboration that we don't always think about as we're making decisions. And so it's always this, you want to have a buy-in, and that's where the change management come in. You have to think about what your decisions are and what you see that you need to have. What happens to the next team that needs to take this and run with it? What impacts? So you have to think of beyond what I need right now versus how is this going to influence the others, and make sure that everyone is on board and not running to catch on to the train, and they may not be able to catch on and jump on board. So I think that's one of the biggest learnings that I've had, and the shifts that I needed to adjust to.
Sure. And a great follow-up question from the audience from Maribel. What was the greatest obstacle when transitioning from an American corporate world to the global world? Did you feel like an expat in some ways?
Yeah, and I was afraid. I have to tell you, I was really, really afraid. I felt like I stepped into something that I didn't know how to paddle back from. And when I realized there was no paddling back, I just said, you know what, I'm going to go for it and I'm going to stroke and get through it. Sometimes I did feel like an expat because I was never just flying overseas, stay for a week and come back. So it wasn't this, I can fly to New Jersey and come back the same week. I would be there for a month or two at a time. And that culture shock was, oh my God, I'm not at home and I'm there without my family. I'm there by myself. But I would have to say the warmth and the embracement that I received from my colleagues, they really pulled in to say, you know what, you're part of the family. So I don't think I felt like an expat. They no matter where I've gone, I've never felt unsafe. Our organization is one of safety first, and we believe in buddy system. So, the organization has done a fantastic job of ensuring that individuals have the opportunity to grow in their career, grow outside of their comfort zone, and that there's always a safety partner there to help, whether it's safety emotionally, safety from in numbers, but always felt that it was a great opportunity to learn. So yeah, I don't think I've ever felt out of sorts, only on that first initial, oh my God, where am I?
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, and you speak really well to a growth mindset and learning mindset, and how, when you're in school, it's sometimes you think you'll be done with school and learning when you graduate, but that's certainly not true. Can you speak to that learning and growth mindset you have to have?
Yeah, that is not true for certain. We spoke on it earlier. Things always change. It changed from one moment to the next. It could be something is set in stone today from a legal perspective, and in the snap of an eye. I mean, we're experiencing it now with this COVID situation. We were on lockdown at the beginning of the year, starting in March, and then we gradually came off of lockdown. Now you're hearing of this wave 1 and wave 2, and you're starting to see the laws are changing again. It's always evolving, and learning should be that way. It's always evolving. LinkedIn has LinkedIn Learning. You have Google. You have all of these different learning apps that you have, and we should be like a sponge. I mean, I'm not going to date myself, but I mean, I actually will pick up and learn as much as I can, especially now that we have the apps that's available. I actually use one of the apps to try to learn different languages, understand the cultures that I'm going in. So you're always at a point of learning. And I think that will never, ever change. And it shouldn't. You should always want to know what's happening and what's going to be the next new thing that's coming.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great follow-on question too from Maggie from the audience. How important is time management And what is your trick to being an organized HR global professional?
I wish I had a trick.
Me too.
I would say, especially in these times, I mean, right now we're living in strange times. So time management, of course, is fundamental. I mean, we have to be able to prioritize. And I think the tools that we have, I use Outlook. So I use notes. I write down and use my tablet because I keep it with me. What are the most critical things that I need? And I try to prioritize those. And some days I may have a priority list of 10 and something happens and things fall downhill and those 10, those priorities shift. But as long as you have a system that works for you, and I would say the way that I started, I used to have this day timer and I wrote everything down. Now that I have it digitally, I can click it off and I can file it away. I can go back to it. I think that is most important. But from time management, you also have to factor in some self-care time because you cannot, and I've learned that the hard way, do everything and be everything to everybody if you're not being good to yourself as well.
Yeah.
So I think the mindfulness, being able to be able to say no. I mean, sometimes you'll get requests that are just people don't want to do the work, and you go, I understand, but here is tools that I'm going to offer you to be able to do this from a self-service model. Unfortunately, my time, I don't have the ability. If I did, I would help you, but I'm going to help you be able to help yourself. And sometimes it's okay to say no. You have to. But then when it's time to cut it off, you cut it off, and then you pick it up and be as honest as possible. Don't overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah.
I think that is probably the biggest, most important piece of advice I can give anyone is if you really do not see that you're capable of doing it, be honest, because then your credibility will not be impacted.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah. Well, on that notion of time, which we know is a big intercultural component, in terms of time management, is it similar working for a Swedish company in terms of that particular cultural variable? Are there any other culture variables from an intercultural perspective that would be similar or different working for a Swedish company, relative to a U.S. company?
Yeah, from a U.S. company, we have this culture that we're going to keep going. There's not this slowdown period. Whereas one thing that I have noticed from the Swedish organization and a lot of the European-based organization, they do believe in putting yourself first, just as I've just mentioned. You don't have to cram everything into every hour. I mean, you really want to be able to, because life is precious, and that is something that I could see from a difference from the cultural standpoint is it's not so high pressured as we have here in the U.S. And believe it or not, sometimes I ask myself, where am I? Because sometimes I want to keep moving, and they say, okay, it's okay. We can take a step back and let's make sure we're not missing something so that we could do it well and not have to redo it. Sometimes in the U.S. and some of the companies I work for is this constant go, and don't stop and reflect and have a moment to step back and say, is this really the right thing for the employees? Is it the right thing for the company? Is it the right thing for our customers? And it has taught me that sometimes it's okay to just stop, reflect, and then begin to make some reasonable and conscious decisions and not work so reactively.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the other thing too, working with European companies or offices is when they take their vacation, which I wish we would do the same.
Vacation. Yes. Yeah. That is so true. And actually, I had actually started doing this and didn't realize I was being quote unquote European. It's because with me being HR, I see the burnout in some of our employees because we work at such a high pace, and we tend to feel like if we do take our time, we won't meet the standards that we have set in our own mind that we need to have. And we're not doing this self-care, and it's okay. We should disconnect. We should recharge. You have earned the vacation. It is a benefit that came along with the package of when you came on board. And the company in Europe, they really do frown upon working during your vacation hours. It's something that they really promote that from a health and welfare standpoint. It is critical that you have a chance to recharge. I mean, if you think about it, we get our phones, our mobile devices, our iPhone gets to 35% and we panic and we run and put it into a charger and it recharges. We set it still. Just as that battery drains in our mobile devices, our tablets, the battery drains in our bodies as well. And we have to have a chance to recharge. And I would have to say the European organizations, culture, they promote and protect that
They do.
standpoint. Yeah,
Yes.
they're very protective of the employee that way. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's even legislation going around now in Europe around COVID and work from home and the labor
Yes.
laws and protections. And
Yes.
I know in Germany we've had I think it's part of the local labor law where employees should not be checking email when they're
Yes,
off work or off hours, let alone on vacation.
Yes, and we really should not be emailing the employee during their off hours. You have to respect that time.
Yeah.
And some of the countries do have that in place where we can, organizations can get in trouble locally for sending emails to the employee during their scheduled off hours.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, Lena, if you were hiring one of our awesome SIU soon-to-be graduates into your company, or even an Intel or a big company or global company, what skills would you be looking for if you were hiring somebody?
I would definitely look for someone who's open to change, because organizations change. Uh, you may come in one role, and we recognize that your skill set is really one that we can develop you into something different. Be open to those opportunities, open to learn, understand that, no matter, and Dr. Engstrom, no offense to the professors, no matter what you may have learned in school, reality when you get into the work environment may be totally different. Be open to learning that. And I think that that piece is the most important, and being able to communicate effectively, being open to challenges. I mean, being able to also challenge back. I do not look for individuals that will be that yes person. Yes, tell me what to do and I'll do it. I say jump off a cliff. Yes, I'm going to do it. I want you to be able to push back and say, but why? Because that's what we bring you in for, the expertise to challenge the norm and challenge it in an appropriate way and see where we can develop to go forward.
Absolutely. That's where some of the best innovation happens. And we do
Yes.
that at Intel all the time with our interns, which is how we hire college grads, either undergrads or grad students, into Intel.
Yes.
We absolutely create incubation spaces for our new employees. So they can share their new perspectives.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, yes.
Yep. That's awesome. So a little bit of a different topic here from Monica. Really good question here is, it is very inspiring to see a woman in a position of leadership. Have you ever faced gender discrimination? And if so, how did you overcome it? Either in a past role or current role, or from your experience?
Yeah, I actually worked for an environmental consulting group some years ago, and I was probably one of the first senior African American managers. And there was a manager who was not very fond of me taking the initiative to push him to do the right thing. And he actually came into my office, and first he called and was not very nice on the phone and said some pretty inappropriate things. And I stood up and told him, until you can behave like an adult and have a conversation, I'm going to end this conversation. And I counted to 3. He continued, and I politely said, I'm hanging up the phone, hung up. And I did it to him 3 times. And then he came back to the office. He came in, my assistant was panicking. He came in, breezed by her, came in the office and slammed the door. He says, you know what? You're the only one that had the kahunas to put me in my place. So again, I believe in respect. And I think it's okay to demand the respect appropriately for the skill sets that I brought to the table. And if you demand the respect appropriately, then the doors will start to open up. And when this particular situation got to the owner of the company, he came and he apologized and he put a directive in place to say everyone should be treated fairly, no matter gender, because some of what he said was about the gender and some other things, but no matter what the gender, the ethnicity, everyone is created equal. Diversity and inclusion is important, and that was something that this organization I work for, it is important. It is number one, and many of the organizations that I have worked with, they have made that a priority, and it's really nice to see that this is something that now, as you know, unfortunately, the times that we're in, this is something that's still there, that we have room for improvement, but organizations are being socially responsible, and they're making this part of their core strategy to ensure that everyone is being treated fairly and equally, no matter where you're at on that spectrum.
Agreed. I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to follow that up with diversity and inclusion initiatives at corporations, and Intel's certainly taken a leadership position on that. Yeah, I wanted to talk about that as in terms of this, it really becomes part of the business strategy. It's not just a program. It's not just a training
Correct.
class.
It's part of the
It's got to be part of the culture. So
yes, it is. And I think it's part of the organization's sustainability. I mean, what I'm finding is, and I think it is so refreshing, and I'm so inspired to see it as new college graduates come out and they begin to look at organizations to see where they want to set their roots, they're beginning at. They're holding organizations accountable. Where do you stand from a sustainability standpoint for environment, for your people? How are you treating your people? They want to see these social programs in place. And I applaud, I really do applaud this generation for the accountability that's being put there. And this generation is making significant changes in the way that organizations have historically looked and approached some of these sensitive topics. So I encourage it. Yes.
absolutely. Well, it's a great example of be the change you want to see. As you said, come in, be that change, be the leader that you're looking for. We say that all the time at Intel.
Yes.
You know, don't, quit looking up, be the leader you've always, you've been waiting for. Yes. And diversity and inclusion is certainly a big part of that. Neil asks on that question, what's the relationship between diversity and inclusion? And how do you understand that, or how does your company understand that?
So when I think of diversity, it is not just about gender. It's not just about ethnicity. It is diversity of thought. We bring individuals into the organization outside our normal industry. I actually came from a financial industry, and I was invited to join a industry of manufacturing, and they knew I had absolutely no background, no inclination of what manufacturing entailed, but that was one of the reasons they brought me in, because they wanted this diversity of how to approach situations. So it's not about race, creed, or color. It's about diversity of thought. Inclusion is being felt like you are a part and invited to the table. Inclusion is not, you know what, come and have a seat and then being talked around. Inclusion is, I want to hear what you have to say. I want to include what your thoughts are, and let's see how we can incorporate this into our daily way of going forward. Feeling wanted and knowing that I am wanted at that table. I'm being invited, I'm being sought out, included into those discussions. So that is, for me, what's most important. I don't feel like I'm just a bump on the log and I'm there to meet a quota. That it's not that at all. Right. It is truly about your voice is important. And I am one of the bigger influencers in the organization for the team that I support. People seek me out and I feel included. I feel wanted and feel needed. So I think the organization really has set us all up for success.
Absolutely.
In that
absolutely. Area. Great. Well, last question here, again, and this comes from Monica. So again, thanks for all the participants that are asking questions here in the chat. Would you recommend getting a graduate degree or undergrad degree or certifications or experience?
I recommend you getting whatever degree you can go after.
Okay.
I believe I come from a family of educators, And someone has told me I'm a career student, but I'm okay with that because I learn. And the more you learn, the more you can bring to the table, because things, as I said, always change, and there's a fresh perspective. I get your degree. Don't stop. I mean, if you have the opportunity, and to be quite honest, if I had the time, I mean, I have 6 kids, I have 7 grandchildren, the 8th one on the way. I work globally. I have a family to take care of, but I still find time to take a session on LinkedIn Learning. I still find time to go into Workday Learning and learn something. I am going after a different degree. If I can do it and don't feel like I should stop, I encourage no one to stop. I encourage, if you can reach it to the moon, keep going.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Great conversation. Great discussion. Thank you for the questions for the participants. Hopefully you're getting a lot out of this from real life experience and what you can do with your communication degree. So really appreciate it, Lena. And I'll pass it back to Craig here to wrap us up.
Thank you.
Thank you, John and Lena. This was just like absolutely like wonderful. I know that I personally learned a lot, and I know that just watching the chat, like folks were being very inspired by kind of questions they wanted answered, and feel very gracious for the answers you provide, or grateful for the answers that you provided. At this time, I'd like to ask Bolton Morales, a PhD candidate in communication studies, to offer some concluding remarks.
All right. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Lena. And it's good to see you again, John. I just wanted to go ahead and say, on behalf of the attendees and the sponsors of this session, Southern Illinois University, Carbondale's Department of Communication Studies, SIU College of Liberal Arts, and Communication at Work, LLC, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to prepare remarks for this event and share your wisdom and experience with all of us, especially with the students who are able to come and participate. I know I especially appreciated the comments about the importance of communication, specifically intercultural and organizational communication, as well as the critical speaking and listening skills. I also found it very critical when you said that you need to have a network of individuals in the same field that you can learn from and ask for guidance. I found that to be super important. And then the notes that you had about don't overpromise and underdeliver as to impact your credibility, being open to opportunities and having the ability to learn and grow, and then being the leader that you're looking for and waiting for as opposed to looking up. I think that all of those were really great pieces of information. And I know that personally, I'm going to use a lot of this info as I get ready to graduate and look for my next steps. So thank you so much, both of you and everyone. I really appreciate it. And please accept our virtual handshake and the forthcoming thank you card and gift as a token of our gratitude for you being here with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was a great honor, and it was worth me staying up. I mean, I've been up since before midnight. I had a 1 a.m. Chicago time call, which is 8 a.m. in Europe, but this was the best part of my day. So thank you again.
Yeah, it was very, we're very grateful that you were able to come. And I want to thank everybody for showing up. I put a link for students that are here as part of class for you to fill out that form. It is in the chat. Also, right after this, we do have a quarantini hour if you want to stop by.
Quarantini hour.
That's right.